What's up people in the intro, hope you're an amazing day. So my name is Kirsty and I live in Japan. So in today's video I am going to discuss a few things that has changed me with living in Japan and things that I would never do in England that I will happily do in Japan. So let's jump into today's video. So the first one is cycling. I would never cycle in England. So I think cycling in England is very dangerous and so many accidents happen. And one of my biggest pet peeves to cycling in England is you have to cycle on the road, and I think that is very dangerous, and this is also what leads to a good chunk of our accidents in England when a cyclist is hurt is because they're on the road. And I always think cycling should be on the pavement unless there's pedestrians, and then the cyclist can go onto the road and then back onto the pavement where it's much safer. And this is what I love about Japan, because cycling is on the pavement. You can cycle on the pavement, and I think that is 10 times much more safer. Also as well, for where I live in a city, I don't have a car, so to get around the city a little bit easier, cycling is my get to, especially when I go to the gym, because where my gym is, it's a half an hour walk, where if I cycle it's about 15 to 20 minutes, so it does save a lot of time. And going shopping and stuff is a lot easier on the bike because I have a basket, and I actually really enjoy cycling. You know, I want to get fitter as well, so I kind of cycle pretty much every day or every other day, which you would have never catched me on a bike in England, where in Japan I am happy to cycle wherever I go. So one is a social life. So back home I didn't have a big social life, and I definitely go out here more, but we kind of go more out to eating, and this kind of leads to, I like that there isn't a tipping culture here. In England there's not a big tipping culture. Actually, tipping's really big in America, and tipping's about 50-50 in England. But the things that really annoy me with British tipping is, depending where you go, it automatically gets put on at the end of the bill. They automatically put a 10% tip on, which I don't really like, because there's times the waiters and waitresses haven't done anything. It's either been automatic and you haven't had that interaction. So I always get very angry. And the nice thing in England, you can take it off, but you have to ask. And there's also just times where like they haven't done a good job. Like there's just times where you've done nothing, you don't deserve a tip. And also, we are England, we're not the biggest tippers. A lot of the tipping culture has been influenced from America, and I have no problem tipping. Normally if I'm in a pub, I will try and tip, because I have worked that life of being in a pub, and working in a pub is hard. There's a lot of abuse to the waiters and waitresses, so I always try and tip there. But that's kind of about it. And especially if you haven't done a good job, I don't want to automatically have to tip, just because with those tips as well, the staff don't necessarily get those tips. It's normally what the company sticks it on and says that it goes to the staff, where a lot of the time it just goes back to the company. So if I'm going to tip, I'd rather take that off and give the waiters or waitress actual cash. And this is one thing I kind of like in Japan. There's no tipping culture, and ironically enough, I've definitely had much greater service here than I've had back home, where there'd be times I'd quite happily tip because you've served me really well, but they just don't have that tipping culture here, which low-key I do quite like, because also for when I do spend, I try and be conscious of how much I'm spending, where when you don't have to tip, you know at the end of the bill, you know exactly what you're paying. So I do quite enjoy that. And also, just before I was leaving England, because of like inflation, there's like a borderline recession, all the after effects from COVID, a lot of the cafes and places we went to, the price was going up, but also kind of serving and quality of food wasn't improving. I remember one of our local cafes, I paid £10 for a basic jacket potato, and this jacket potato was shit, and I could have made a jacket potato better myself at home. And I was thinking to myself, like, it's crazy that just before I left, like, kind of simple food like that was getting to £10, where if you went in the supermarket to make it, it's only a couple of pounds. And the thing is, when I go out to eat, I like it to be good food and better quality, and something that, like, there's times where obviously some people are saying, well, if you can make a better jacket ticket and make it at home, which is fine, but sometimes you want to go out and have something easy and you don't want to make it. But if I'm going out to have something I can make at home, I'm expecting it to be an okay quality, not for the potato to be burnt, not for the beans to be burnt, all these kind of like basic necessities, not for it to be overly burnt and done. Because realistically, if I'm going to eat a burnt potato, I'm going to eat a burnt potato I made rather than one I'm paying overpriced with. And that's how I just felt a lot just before I left England. A lot of food was coming overly priced and the quality was just dipping, where it's nice going out here. And a lot of the food I haven't really had anything like overburnt, overcooked. So I just find the quality of food in restaurants a lot better than I found in England just before I left. But that could be influenced with kind of cost of living, recession, and everything else. And I just find the things a lot more reasonably priced here. So that's one big thing. I'm sure a lot of the other Western countries are finding this. Cost of living has gone through the roof, and there has been a bit of cost of living change in Japan. They have upped like a few things tinily, but not as big as the inflation difference is from Western countries to Japan. So that's kind of one thing I do really like here, because I find just before I left, like the money I was making, it was more just going back into pay bills and basic things. And it was more, I just kind of felt more I was surviving than living, where coming and living here now, I definitely feel more of I'm not surviving, I'm able to enjoy life. You know, I can go out and eat a lot more. If I go out here, I don't feel guilty for going out and going to a restaurant, where back home, especially when I live in the times, I went out, and if it wasn't for me wanting to say goodbye to friends and family and stuff, I definitely would have been going out as much. But I thought it's the last time I see them for a while, so I need to make the effort to do all these restaurants and things. But I always felt guilty afterwards, because I was spending like too much money that I need for Japan, where here it definitely just feels nice that I can go out and not feel guilty for the money I'm spending. And finally, I think the last one is less news and media time. So compared to when I was back home, I was definitely watching the news a lot more, where here I don't really watch the news when it's all in Japanese. There's times I switch on NHK News, but I really like NHK News because it actually talks about news, where I find in England a lot of the news, it's more just to kind of trigger like political agendas rather than like actual things going on in the world. And I think that's kind of one thing with like a lot of tension from people around, because I think a lot of the media just triggers political agenda fights and it just sets people off in other ways. So I find it very kind of healthy not to kind of hear that kind of news all the time and be around it. So I think like mental health being has definitely like improved a lot more being in Japan than it was at home, because I definitely felt it was plummeting a lot more. It's not all from the news, that was also from my old job, and the job here is definitely 10 times better than my old one. But yeah, I think that's kind of one big thing, like mental health and kind of just physical improvement of myself has definitely gone up a lot more being here than when it was in England. So yeah, that's just a few things just want to talk about of things I've noticed with me living in Japan than being back home. But that's everything for today's video. If you enjoyed it, leave it a like. If there's anything you want to see on the channel, leave a comment down below, and I'll see you in the next Japan related video. Bye.